So I would like to shortly introduce our first presenters, David HAINES and Joyce HINTERDING. And Joyce HINTERDING lives and works in the Blue Mountains, Australia. Her practice is internationally recognized for exploring acoustic and electromagnetic phenomena with custom-built field recording and monitoring technologies, including VLF antenna and experimental graphite drawings. She often collaborates with artist David HAINES to produce large-scale immersive video and real-time interactive 3D environments. Your work is also showed in a PostSensorium exhibition. Thank you very much. We are so excited. And you also, Joyce, participated in Waves exhibition exactly 15 years ago. And if Douglas would not say that it's 15 years, I wouldn't believe, because because all things you do, we follow so closely, so that we have this feeling that we know you very well. We are teaching students so much about all these topics intensively, also always showing you as examples wherever we do it, in MIT or in Liepāja, it doesn't matter. So that's why I was
likewise I have to say.
Somehow big surprise that it's 15 years since Waves. Nevertheless, so I'm really interested also in what you do, and please present.
Okay.
So you're going to run the PowerPoint.
Okay, so we're going to actually talk a little more specifically to the work that is on exhibition in RIXC at the moment. We were going to talk a little bit more generally, but we felt that given that it was on exhibition, we would take a couple of 1-minute extracts out of it and really drill down into what is going on in that work. And for those of you who aren't in RIXC, who can't see it, you'll get the 4 little tastes of it. Just to begin that work, just the description of the work that's in RIXC at the moment. It's called The Grounding Ungrounding, and it's an open-ended documentary on our practice. And it is concerned with listening and observing and speculating on rock formations, energetic and geoelectric nature in the Blue Mountains World Heritage region. At around 1,000 meters altitude, ice-cold clear water is pushed to the level of the high plateau. Here we encounter the residues of phase-shifting matter. Iron in liquid form becomes ironstone caught in aquicludes and is now frozen in form and shape, and leaving behind mysterious harmonic structures known as pagodas. The work takes as its source of inspiration some of the ideas found in the novel Mount Analog by René Dumas, first published in 1959. In the spirit of pataphysics, the film follows the artist's field recording journeys above and below the earth, from rocky ironstone banded pagodas, deep sandstone canyons, to a Klondike stony meteorite. As the climbers of an upside down mountain, we listen to the massless telluric currents and observe caustic light patterns bouncing through the canyons. These are the occulted voices that allow us to get a sense that the earth dissolves into the cosmos. So we've got a PowerPoint that we're going to work with, and as I said, we're going to talk really kind of more specifically just to that work. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's good. Let's fire the PowerPoint. Okay,
please let us know if it really starts maxing out. It should be all right. I think we tested it.
Optimize for video. So the title of our talk is Wrangling Chaos, and I guess that's a kind of phrase that we coined because you know, we realized that we were always sort of straddling between composition, which is what artists do, and then observing how the world composes itself. And then somewhere in between there's this notion of chaos, which You know, thinking of Michel Serres in Doug's talk, you know, one of the things that he really exemplifies is a great sensitivity towards dynamics. And also, if we think about thermodynamics, you know, with thermodynamics in action, you get islands of stability and islands of turbulence. And we're lucky enough to live in a backyard that is full of very complex country, and it exemplifies all of those flows and relationships, and it's a perfect observational environment for an artist to live within when we're thinking about the world composing and artists composing. So let's get into it.
So this is it's 4 sections. This is just 1 minute from section number 1. And we're going forward.
I think.
So one of the remarkable things about these pagodas that we live with is that they are a kind of, they've emerged through a kind of precipitation process that has left bands of sandstone and ironstone in somewhat kind of harmonic or logarithmic kind of patterns. So we started to look at, I guess, methods for recording them. And this kind of begins with, I guess, the journey. It's a journey to get out there. And as you can see in the video, there's our campsite. And
this is a very dry campsite, but we're literally camping on top of a like a buried pagoda structure here. You can see these sort of strange rocky shapes, which are actually ironstone plates sitting on the surface. We had to carry all our water out. We tried carrying a trolley down a dirt road with all our equipment, and then had to leave that behind and literally walk through an untracked area. This area is called the Pinnacles on a map. It doesn't have an Aboriginal name as such, but it's definitely in Wiradjuri country, which is interesting. And there are some interesting signs of Aboriginal people throughout that country, which we won't show or talk about out of respect. But you know, there's rock art in the area, and signs of occupation goes back about 40,000 years.
yeah, okay. So part of what's kind of, I guess, informs this work is this book, Mount Analog, which David bought.
Yeah, I suppose.
Owned as a young person.
Yeah, I mean, every artist has, I think, a number of spirit guides, so to speak. And sometimes they're philosophers and theorists and thinkers, people like Doug. But there are also novelists and poets, and Remy Demal definitely exemplified this notion of, you know, pataphysical poetics of science and the imagination, and also mountain climbing. And a lot of people who live in the Blue Mountains are mountain climbers by occupation. I started rock climbing when I was 12. And it gave me a great gift of being able to enter into real, what we call wild country, sometimes called wilderness, but we prefer the term wild country. But Mount Analog fuses this sort of idea of the imaginary mountain climbing with the world, the wider world, and it's set in the Antipodes. And of course, they leave France and go to climb an imaginary mountain in the South Pacific.
It's kind of described as, or it's subtext, I don't know if you can read it there, it's a novel of symbolically authentic non-Euclidean adventures in mountain climbing.
Which sort of summarize our practice in a way, because, you know, when Joyce really observed that these pagodas had this harmonic structure, it seemed like an easy step for us to go, I wonder what these things are doing. Are they resonating in sympathy with the wider world? And up here, the sky is never far away, and nor is the cosmos. We do a lot of astrophotography as part of our work, and of course we've looked at the sun very closely with our work Earth Star. So, you know, we're always looking through this sort of, we have this elemental engagement. Remy Demal injects a great sort of poetic logic into the frame of things.
Yeah, so we're on the intelligent ecosystems side of this category, and the more than human conditions, which the assumption is that we've walked out there thinking, I wonder whether these pagodas, which are unique in the world, with their strange harmonic structure, are something like Mount Analog, this mysterious mountains that don't exist anywhere else in the world, are some kind of listening device or some kind of receiving system. So we've begun on this process of exploring what they might have been. We've done a lot of research into how they were formed. And this is an image of the lesser gang rings, which is a periodic precipitation process. Now, we know that the sandstone in the Blue Mountains is a very ancient seabed, and that it's all precipitated, and it's all been in some kind of harmonic or aquatic situation with, as we understand it, some kind of cyanobacteria or some kind of bacteria that was digesting iron and then being caught in waves and harmonic kind of structures. The lesser gang rings offers a really interesting window into the idea that these things have precipitated into these harmonic structures.
Yeah,
or cemented.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, they don't really understand. I mean, there's so much of this that is not understood. They still don't understand precisely why laser gang rings appear, and that seems perfectly compatible with the kind of mysteries that an artist's practice contains. It's sort of like the proposition is, well, what happens when we plug into a pagoda and let's see if it's doing something. And you could see in that early image of Joyce with, you know, had wired into the ironstone ring there. This is out at, this is on the top of the Pinnacles, and it's interesting, a lot of the geological formations connect to the barotyme, and they're naming that's actually Cape Horn over there behind us. But the great thing about the Antipodean thing is its imagination. It'll conjure its own version of Cape Horn, and it'll be very different to the one that we normally think of in world terms, world historical terms, and that's interesting. I mean, the early colonizing explorers thought that over these mountains was an inland sea, but little did they know that they had to walk across literally an inland sea, which was very ancient. Okay.
The sounds you can hear in that first part are actually the sounds that are recorded from this spot. And the device that I'm working with is, it's actually a wind radio, so it's a radio scanner, and I'm using an electroconductive gel to connect to the ion, to connect to the ion bands. This is a kind of sitting on the top, listening to maybe what this very small ironstone plate that's sitting on the top, but we have done it all the way down the pagoda, listening to the different parts of the bands, and the recordings from that make up the work. And here, as you see in René Dumal's, his curving force of rings and these strange kind of circular forces that are
totally compatible with the non-Euclidean notion of curved space as well. And curves also feature in our work, and so do lines. All of the classical forms of art appear in there in some way or another.
So this is the antenna that kind of caught my imagination when looking at after walking, I mean, a lot of walking through the pagodas, and then finally thinking, I wonder whether we could actually listen to them. The Yagi-Uda antenna is actually the, going back to Doug's talk, is the antenna that was designed by a Japanese person, or two Japanese scientists, and they couldn't work with it very well. It was never popularized there, and they ended up using it on the little boy, the bomb that blew up Japan. And so there was this sort of weird irony that, you know, this antenna guided the atomic bomb back into Japan, and it is actually a Japanese directional antenna. As you can see in this situation, the maths will indicate the wavelength in relationship to the size, and that should give you the frequency that you will be receiving.
Appreciate that pretty quick.
Yeah, this is actually the same Yagi antenna with with the maths worked out so that you could receive SBS television. As you can see, the two terminal posts, it's only all of these things here. I don't know whether I can use my mouse here. These are waveguides. The only active part is here, and this is where you connect to. Now this is a reflector. So this is the kind of principle that we've taken off on.
So it's basically a drawing of a pagoda on its side. Yeah. Okay.
And here are the, looking at the sizes, I have to say, looking at the dimensions of the pagoda, we started to work out basically what frequency we might be needing to kind of look into and receive into. So it's all been kind of, you know, it's a kind of science of approximation.
And investigate, yeah, it's speculative investigation.
It's very speculative. Anyway, that is...
well, here we are in 2014 when this idea first appeared. And we were out, this is a place called Khan Creek. It's not actually national park, it's not even in the World Heritage, but it's close, it's connected to it. And we are out recording in the rain, plugging ourselves into a conductive ironstone structure. Luckily, there was no lightning around that day. We get a lot of lightning up here. We might have been cooked. You know, this is a different kind of bushwalking to that sort of destination idea. You know, tiger walking is like, oh, I will walk from point A to point B in a particular amount of time. For us, it's a much more slower relationship to the landscape, and sometimes we only travel, you know, a few kilometers in a day to really get inside this really complex country. And we do like to, oh, here we are on the side of that big pagoda, and this one required, you know, ropes and equipment to do it safely, because the point where we're about you know, 100 feet off the ground there. Nice, easy climbing, but, you know, very fragile, these structures too. So they have to be climbed across really carefully so as not to break them on, so we don't fall off and die.
You can see here the ironstone plates, and then we're walking on the ironstone plates, and we're
totally tied in and safe at that point.
Plugged into various parts of it. So this is part 2. This is Canyon, and I'll just let it play. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Here it goes. I just want to move that thing.
No, just play it, man. Play it.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. We both breathed in and started speaking at the same time. Go for it. Go for it.
So these canyons run all through the Blue Mountains. Again, these are unique in the world, and the canyons that we chose to work with are the north, south,
east-west.
East-west.
Yeah.
The east-west canyons.
Yeah, because the north-south canyons tend to be very vertical. They often require rope work to get into. But curiously, that meant that in that diagram you saw a north-south facing axis as a diagram. And so what this revealed to us was that the telluric currents are running north-south and the canyon runs east-west. So it gives us this cross-sectional plane across the current. And we were able to sort of empirically prove that to ourselves by where we position these probes. And what you were hearing then is the telluric current. So it sounds a lot like the VLF. But of course, when certain bands of noise are filtered out, these harmonic melodies appear, which is the beautiful thing about audio processing, really, that suddenly out of that silence is also an inaudible melody playing through the earth, which is very moving discovery in some ways.
I think the weirdest thing about that, so the probes, as you could see, are plugged into the water, and you kind of think that electromagnetic energy and water, you cut that doesn't really, you know, like that you would somehow be, it would be grounded, right? It wouldn't get anything. But what was really clear was that the spherics that you normally hear when you use a VLF antenna were also in the earth. And it didn't matter whether you were in the water or not in the water. It just depended on where the probes went into the earth. So they had to go in on a north-south. They had to be oriented to each other. And then you got quite a loud sound. And if the probes went in long ways down the canyon, couldn't hear anything. It had to go north-south. Anyway, it's just the most peculiar experience to realize that the cosmos was actually just passing straight into the earth. And that idea of grounding which we think about as, you know, that we ground electricity, isn't quite working there. We unzip the idea of grounding.
we are working with muon detectors at the moment, and of course, you know, muons teaches that there are these energetic particles that just keep traveling through everything. You know, there's so much to learn in all of this, really. The other thing that needs to be said is that this telluric current probing stuff is used a lot practically in mining. And in this area here, the World Heritage butts onto a large area of underground longwall type coal mines. And in fact, the coal mines go underneath the World Heritage area. They're mining literally under the park. And only up the road from here, we could camp on in a campsite and hear the mining underneath us through the ground at night. And that's a very eerie set of occasions there. Okay. We're probably eating up time.
I'm starting to realize that we're
okay, let's go. Come on.
Do you want to keep going? Yeah, okay.
It's good. So here is information, and in that information part of, you know, that's the information part of the equation in all of this, that we see these patterns forming that express themselves. They're directly expressive of light and its interaction with rocks and water, and this beautiful diagram here that Joyce has made of the effect of caustics creating that network of light that you see. This is like nature's television for us, and I'm sure it was for Aboriginal people as well, this sort of spectacle of the light. And here we see parallel rays coming in, and then they hit a curving medium like water, and you get this formation of
this kind of, and we're going to run out of time, but this kind of opens up this other idea that's in this work, which is about non-Euclidean geometry, and it is the geometry that Euclid's fifth postulate was the parallel postulate, and it gets, as time goes on, they realize that it falls apart when you start to look at curves and planets, and when you start to wrap it onto balls. Basically the parallel postulate falls apart, and as they rebuilt non-Euclidean geometry, we end up with the geometry that produces curved space, that produces elliptical geometry, and we get the geometry of curves, and this is the geometry of light. Anyway, so
let's
sorry, I'll just
let it go.
I'll just let you see. As you can see there, that is the sound that you've got there is actually the sound that came out of that rock. It's really strange. it's a chondrite meteorite, so it's
Well,
full of little...
it's said to be a chondrite meteorite. Could be humbug. In Australia, we have a term called humbug, which comes from Aboriginal people, for when Aboriginal people tell white people kind of bullshit, and they tell us a bit of humbug if they don't want us to know something. So it could be humbug. We don't know whether it's a meteorite. If it is, it's a bloody big one. But this was a crazy fellow in Melbourne invited us to come and do a recording of this rock that he'd found, and he had lots of theories about it. He was an interesting character in himself, but we don't have time to talk about him. But it is, it's hot, it's radioactive. It was about 2 degrees hotter than any other rock in the yard.
That's what he said. I don't know whether it was.
Yeah, we didn't run a Geiger counter. We do have a Geiger counter, but we didn't take it with us. But yeah, we didn't run a Geiger counter over us, but it made a beautiful sound.
It made that, it's amazing sound. It's this incredible sound that came out of it. When I went home, obviously you can search for frequencies. So you can, I noted down the frequency that was, so basically I'm just sort of doing a big scan. We just do a big scan through the whole spectrum to see what is the, I guess, what sounds are resonating in the rock. And then later on you can check to see what the frequency is. And a lot of the pagodas and stuff, we end up picking up a lot of data transmissions, like a lot of terrestrial radio gets caught up in the rock. But this one, actually, when I took it home, it was a satellite test. This is
in the context of someone in this yard who was literally producing artificial diamonds, had a sapphire making furnace, and was grinding perfectly spherical gemstones, large scale ones. So he was an interesting character. He also invented a laser and a hydrogen recycling system. So he was interesting. Yeah, but anyway, this is the country. This is where we walk and play and live, and this is the source of our art. One bit of it, anyway.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, 1-2 questions. Anybody? Wonderful, really great talk.
I would like to ask, but this is a really nice work and you have a really amazing country. But I see that you are dividing the work in 4 parts: is grounding, canyon, network, meteorite, and which is the relation between these 4 parts? This is.
Well, we have
choose this one.
Yeah, look, the artificial separation of those things is practical because the work is open-ended. We will add chapters to it, if you like, and it's just the nature of. We sort of see it as a sort of assemblage work. There are a lot of ways to synthesize these things, but all of those things that are in the work are things that we've done. They're journeys that we've been on. And so they become naturally compartmentalized like that. And and there is a sort of form of bracketing there just to try to give people a little bit of the backstory to these things without having to do labored voiceovers or rely on too much didactic material. It's like a sketchbook for us. And I think it could extend over a lifetime. You know, that would be the aim of it. And we are sort of doing another version of that, this fieldwork stuff, because we really normally make objects and we make photographs and we make video works and we have a very material practice that exists in galleries and other environments, but
very immaterial.
And it's very immaterial as well, because we work with smell, we work with we work with the olfactory, we use game engines, we do a whole bunch of stuff. And in a way, this is a way of showing people a little bit of a view on what it's like to come and stay at our place for the weekend. So, you know, if you come to the Blue Mountains, this is what you'll end up doing with us. So, because this is all we do, really.
Yes, it's a way to explain your experiences, different experiences in the terrain. That is really nice. Thank you.
Okay, one more question. Okay, then I have a question about your title, especially when we wanted to translate grounding and ungrounding into Latvian. So we also started to play with kind of an understanding of what does it mean. So yeah, about like in terms of like electricity. So can you just once again say what was your like discovery about that it's not so easy to unground or ground?
Well, I mean, I think as you can see in a lot of the work that we've done is about listening to the electromagnetic environment, and we do that by being, I guess, in the air. And one of the things that became apparent in this work was that the electromagnetic environment is also in the ground, and we can also listen to that as well. And a little bit, we've had to invent a system for doing that, and that was looking at the pagodas as antenna is not really, I mean, that's a bit far-fetched in some respects. I don't know. It's not, certainly not scientific. It's just it's a kind of speculative idea. And then going down into the canyons and listening, working out a way of listening to telluric currents is just the way that we've worked it out. But yes, the ground.
Can I add to this? You know, it opens with that the drone shot over the campsite, and you know, literally to do that stuff, you have to sleep on the ground, and the ground is hard. It's like we slept on stone that night. Of course, we had a comfortable sleeping mat between us and the earth. But all of this stuff is about absolutely touching the earth in a really, really visceral way. I mean, you fall over in a canyon and break your leg, you are going to get rescued by a helicopter. The earth is hard. That landscape pushes you back, you know, in every sense of the word. It's not easy country necessarily to travel through. We know the earth as ground in that absolutely better than Heidegger. You know, we really understand what the ground is, but we also understand that poetry, the poetics and the energetics elevates all of that. It dematerializes the world and materializes other things about the world that you can't normally access.
Thank you. That was
I'd
good.
love to know the Latin translation. No, the Latin interpretation is gold for us. Please send us an email with how you grapple with that, because maybe we'll use the Latvian version.
I just want on the waves. One of Andrew Murphy.
Yeah,
I think we used an essay from him in the catalogue, and he was so in love with the way that his name was translated.
Yeah, he used it for years.
And he now uses it as his handle on Facebook.
I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, no, in Latvian ground, it is zeme, which means the same as earth.
Ah, perfect.
So everything is the same. So that's why and we also have those many prefixes like on and in, and you know, so we couldn't realize or how actually which ones to choose to get like more exactly to your idea, more precisely closer.
In the spirit of Ricky Jamal, I just a random version of it would be fine.
Exactly, that's what we did. I think we just maybe went for one word which sounded better. I'm sorry. Okay, I will see what's the final version. Okay, thank you very much. So thank you both. Thank you. Okay, and now we are going to next presentation. I will introduce you with Nina Zagledi. Okay, Nina Zagledi is artist, curator, educator. She works internationally on collaborative art, science, and technology projects. She has exhibited and published widely, won awards of her artwork, and she also has initiated, led, and participated in workshops, forums, and festivals worldwide at international events. So thank you, Nina. We are very happy to host you here.
Thank you very much, Rasa. Do you hear me okay?
Very good.
Good. So first of all, I would like to congratulate you, Rasa, and your entire team on yet another successful festival. My only discontent is that this time, instead of being in Riga, once again in Riga, I'm stuck on a very early and rainy morning far away in Toronto, Canada. So I will be quite short, and I would like to start my presentation, and I would like to share my screen. I hope it works. Where is it? Is it working?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, sorry, something is, yes. So Charlotte Selver was one of the early pioneers working on sensory awareness in the 1950s. In 1950, she introduced sensory awareness studies at the New School for Social Research in New York, and in 1963 at the Esalen Institute in California. Charlotte called sensory awareness an experience through the senses. The study of consciousness, however, including sensory perception and awareness, started back in the late 19th century, facilitating the way to current scientific research and pivotal discussions, partly powered now by the pervasive consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. The impact of changes due to the pandemic affects every aspect of our life, counting our sensory awareness. An accepted clinical sign for the detection of COVID-19 infection is the loss of smell or taste. Nicholas Moyner reported a recent study on around 4,000 participants for more than 40 countries, confirming that COVID-19 broadly impacts chemosensory functions across multiple sensory modalities, including the peripheral and central nervous system. The heightened interest in sensory perception led to an increase in exhibitions and conferences, including just within this past year, the Uncommon Senses Conference at the Center for Sensory Studies at the Concordia University in Montreal, the Sensory Orders Exhibition and Discussion at the Lajnia Center for Contemporary Art in Poland, and the ongoing World Sensorium project, upholding that plants not only shaped Earth's history, their chemical signatures has shaped human culture. And there are more conferences to come. Furthermore, the Harvard Business Review reported for 2 decades, marketeers in a variety of industries have been building expertise in reaching consumers through the 5 senses, learning to deploy cues such as the stink from a swig of a mouthwash and the scratch-scratch sound of a Sharpie pen that can intensify perception of brands. New research suggests that we are about to enter an era in which many more consumer products companies will take advantage of sense-based marketing. When exploring sensory awareness, the influence of the geographical, cultural, and social context on individual sensory perception can be illustrated by numerous markers. For example, the currently universal social distancing demand in the pandemic era. It remains undisputed that the advent of the digital communication revolution contributed to a shift in our perception of space and spatial abilities. As far back as 1966, the anthropologist Edward T. Hall noted that social distances have been modified by the use of communication and visualization devices. Sometimes kids, for example, with sensory processing challenges have trouble sensing where their body is in space. They can't always tell how close they are to other people and thus make many mistakes. Last year, in this pandemic, the Sensory Awareness Campaign in Essex, UK, has brought together people with a variety of different disabilities, including those who are blind, deaf, and deafblind. Listening to the experiences and the testimonials from the affected people is really distressing. Regarding public space and private spaces, traditional architecture has previously facilitated a boundary between private and public space. However, the emergence of mobile phones and the internet have blurred the boundaries between discretely private and extended public places. Correspondingly, the notion of private or public, as we have formerly experienced it, have significantly altered, especially during the pandemic, when we realized that public space plays a vital role in our everyday life. An online survey was conducted with 337 participants living in Istanbul between the dates of 1 and 5 June 2020. The change in perceptions and usage of these spaces based on personal, residential characteristics were investigated. The findings of the study revealed statistically significant differences between the perceptions and usage of public spaces and pseudo-public spaces, such as the internet, before and after the COVID outbreak, in terms of personal residential characteristics. Our attitude to and representation of nature is always closely linked to political, religious, cultural, and environmental considerations. The notion of, in the last decades, the notion of the constitution of a sentient being has changed. This development has compelled a reconsideration of knowledge and theory and led to a closer engagement with indigenous peoples. From time immemorial, in contrast to conventional compartmentalized Western worldviews, indigenous cultures across the world focus on a holistic understanding of nature based on thousands of years of traditional experience. These concepts form an integral part of indigenous philosophy, including the notions that everything is connected to everything else. Everything, including sensory experience, is in a state of constant change and this change occurs in cycles or patterns. In Maori heritage, for example, closely linked to and in many ways inseparable from environment, the spirit world of the ancestors is part and parcel of what we see, what we touch, and what we feel. It is an integral place in the being, in the natural world. Indigenous treat often animals as fully sentient beings. Considering indigenous beliefs in the far north, the Inuit consider animals as non-human persons. The similarities between humans and animals are emphasized rather than the difference, and close attention is paid to the relationship between humans and other animals. The Navajo beliefs among the Navajo people are different. In the Navajo universe, every component moves continuously in an interrelated mode, and the notion of time and space has distinctly different interpretations from those adopted since the Renaissance in Western cultures. With the conservative static view of so-called Westerners, it proved easy and reliable to divide space and spatial feelings into segments, to structure the world according to types easy and reliable to divide into various segments and structure everything around us differently. The Navajo world, on the other hand, is essentially the world according to a dynamic forces unsuited for segmenting. It has been noted by scholars that consideration of the nature of time and space and growth and order and feelings, motion and control, and other Navajo concepts are expressed in terms quite impossible to translate into the English language. Lately, whole system theories such as a worldview of interconnectedness and interdependence proposed by David Bohm, theoretical physicist, have found new currency. Bohm and Pitt argued that scientific thinking in the last century favored an abstracted, fragmented approach to nature and reality. They suggested a strong interconnection between space and sensory perception, stressing the importance of direct creativity and communication in the sciences. In the last book, Science, Order, and Creativity, the authors offered intriguing insights into some of the more obstructive scientific theories, including sensory perceptions blocking creativity. I would like to conclude with a few words about sensoria, the arts and sciences of our senses, an interdisciplinary initiative focused on the theme of sensory perception. The Sensory Festival, or an amalgamation of exhibition, was originally conceived to include, on the theme of sensory perception, international artist residencies, workshops, lectures, an exhibition and public events, all culminating in 2021. But due to the pandemic, everything changed and is proposed now to be exhibited in 2022 at the Lasnia Contemporary Art Center in Gdańsk, Poland. Sensoria aims to investigate our sensory world by scientific, social, political, and cultural interpretation, and at the same time offering in our increasingly mediated everyday life, a direct sensorial landscape for the visitors and participants alike. We all hope that you will come and enjoy with us the sensorial events. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nina. Okay, we have a few minutes for Q&A. If anyone has a question, feel free to go ahead and just speak or type it into the chat.
I realized that compared to all those wonderful pictures of Joyce HINTERDING and her collaborator, this is a very dry statement of sensory awareness.
It's maybe not so easy to go rock climbing or scaling up mountains, maybe in Toronto.
No, it's not. It's pretty flat.
Okay.
Hello?
She just finished and we're just waiting to see if there are any questions before we go on to Sandra.
Okay, thank you, Nina. Thank you. Can you stop sharing the screen, please?
Yes, I will. Okay.
Okay, so there is one question. Hello, Nina, could you say more about Charlotte Server?
Yes, she was a very unusual person. She was very much involved in Zen-related social awareness, and she has teamed up with other speakers, and they went around and had workshops on sensory awareness and philosophy.
Okay, thank you. So is there one more question for Nina? Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Nina. I'm really happy to hear about senses from this perspective. Thank you so much for preparing.
Thank you.
Yeah, this very relevant and crucial. And I also wanted to say that actually I feel also very warmly to see you, because Canada was the very last trip before COVID. So I just came back and then we got stuck for almost 2 years also. So yeah, when coming back from Toronto.
Come back to Toronto.
From coming back from Toronto, yeah. So this is, so basically you are from this community, like nearly the last one, whom we met, you know, physically. Okay, so. Okay, thank you. So we move to the next presentation.
Hello.
Yes. So next presentation will be by Sandra. And let me shortly introduce you. So Sandra Alvaro has a PhD in philosophy. She's an adjunct professor of contemporary art at the University of Barcelona, UIB, Autonoma de Barcelona. Among her research main areas are aesthetics and contemporary art, aesthetics and politics of computational technologies, urbanism and posthumanism. Okay, Sandra, welcome.
Hello, thank you. I'm happy to be here again and can share some research with this event. I will try to share my screen. Okay, I hope this will work well. And go to the presentation. Okay, you can see the presentation. Okay. Today, I would like to talk about art as research about perception and its mediations. This also links with the relation between art and science, or between perception and knowledge. Usually, art always has to have a material autonomous substrate. And meanwhile, science statements like to be objective, and this means universally applicable and substrate neutral. This makes that art and science are considered as completely different and even opposite, and also produces a divide between art, which is considered as affective or stimulant, and science, which is considered as semantic and knowable. This division also places humanities in a subordinated position when we are facing important issues as climate change or the threats of the massive adoption of technologies, of intelligent technologies, for example. And meanwhile, science works with data and the design of solutions. Humanities are only attributed with the discussion of the societal impact of these solutions. What I would like to show here from a Laotian perspective and using historical examples is that it is precisely because it's material substrate that art has the potential to build a sensus communis or a transindividuation. This means that art is able to share, to build a shared form, to relate or become with the real, or what is the same, a perceived world, or world perceived in common, from which we can start looking for alternatives to our precarious situation. Perception is the way we relate with the world and the starting point of action and knowledge or representation. Most of the pioneers of informatics agree in that in order to build an intelligent machine, it is necessary to keep it with complex sensors in a way that it can perceive and react to the reality. To frame a little bit the objective of this discussion, I would like to start with this quotation by Isabel Stengers that say that the possibility of a non-barbaric future claims forsaking alternatives to current way of life. And second here means, in the first place, creating a life after grow a life that explores connections with new powers of acting, feeling, imagining, and thinking. And precisely, art is a place from where we can start to create these different connections. To exemplify the relation between art and perception, I would like to summarize one of the first relations between art and science. This is the theory of colors by Goethe that he published in 1810. It's a quite old theory, and it's not. And from the point of view of science, this is not a correct theory, but was a quite influential theory, and I think it shows some things that are interesting. Goethe was known as a writer and started his experiments with optics in 1979. And there are two reasons that led Goethe to write this experimental theory. First, as a painter himself, he was aware that a theatrice of the use of color in art was missing, and color used to be considered as a subjective or secondary quality, and was left to taste and appreciation of the painter, or considered as the result of social and cultural conventions. Second, he also wanted to problematize with the abstract and mathematical optics developed by Newton, which he considered false. The theory of color by Goethe is an organic and holistic theory, and is opposite or different to the science of causality. in science of causality, knowledge is considered as passive, something like the passive discovering of the laws of matter. And yet, opposite considered knowledge as active, and also an active and embodied. And also, he considered the experiment not as a proof of a mathematical law, but the origin of a creative process of mediation between object and subject. With this in mind, Goethe started a series of easily repeatable experiments aimed to discover the organizing principles of actual vision as it happens. That is to say, not to build an ideal model of the perception of color, but the description of the process of vision, or the way by how we organize the real, or what we perceive. After looking himself through the prism and see that nothing happens, it is to say that light was not decomposed in the spectral colors as the Newtonian theories say, he started experimenting and discovered that colors only appeared in particular conditions. And when the distance, inclination of the prism, or the quantity of light and darkness are in concrete thresholds. From these observations, Goethe will consider the perception of color a composite phenomenon, emerging from the interaction of different elements. Then, in addition of chemical or local color, that is the color that solids exhibit in virtue of its chemical composition, Goethe also considered physiological colors, that is the colors that appear only on our eyes or on our retina. Concretely studying the persistence of vision, he will anticipate the complementarity of colors, a theory that after was further developed by Chabrel and used by post-impressionist artists and expressionist artists. Also, and more importantly, he will consider physical or prismatic colors. These are colors that are only appearing in particular atmospheric conditions or when we are looking across different turbid media or prisms. Then, for example, the blue shadow at the basis of a fire only appear when the fire is observed in the darkness. On the contrary, smoke looks yellow when it is observed against a white background, and blue if the background is black. Goethe will resume his theory and his experiments in the chromatic circle. And the chromatic circle is a tool that will be further developed and used in painting and ulterior visual arts, even is still used in marketing also. And in this chromatic circle, he identified two primary colors according its relation or the polarization between darkness and light. This is blue and yellow. Also, the passive addition of these two colors that are at the bottom of the diagram. This is green, and contributes to the primary colors in the intensification of them, that is violet and orange or red, and the addition of these intensified colors, this purple that is opposed to green. And this chromatic circle will have three consequences, and two of them will be instrumental in the shift from representation to experimentation that will characterize 20th century avant-garde. The first one is the perception of color is mediated by human physiology and the disposition of perceived elements. As we have already said, color emerges in an assemblage of interacting elements that also includes the subject. Second, considering physiology, Goethe materializes a subjective phenomenon in a biological process. This is able to produce a sensus communis, an agreement about how humans relate to reality. Following Kant, he placed this convention in the subject, and this way, this convention will adapt to the changing environment of modernity that is characterized by progressive industrialization, accelerated mechanization, fast-growing cities, the apparition of new social classes, and in which traditional conventions were disappearing. As a third consequence, the polarization into darkness and light allows Goethe to link physiology to psychology and give a semantic meaning to colors. Then this way, for example, we consider that orange is a more active and happy color than blue, that is close to darkness. These expressive qualities of the pictorial materials, or percepts in the Leuzian terminology, give a new freedom to painting. Artists could build significant landscapes beyond representation, starting a poetic or speculative praxis. In the words of Paul Klee, the intersection of the real dimension with the pictorial dimension will show that our world in its present shape is not the only possible world. This experimental disposition of materials, for example, in the constructivists, will lead to envision the possibility of societal change. Well, as we advance towards our epoch, the advancement of experimental science will increase the spectrum of the visible beyond the organic limits of our view. New mediations as microscope in the area of photography will allow us to see the world at different scales. And we have them furthermore, dispositives of capture, different sensors and computer technologies will divide the perceived in discrete and combinable units, or electronical impulses, which could be rendered in multiple forms, adopting infinite expressive qualities. This new material will be deployed by artists to produce new assemblages in which vision becomes inhuman and humans transindividuated with forces and times beyond its organic limits. Computer art projects image individuals in complex, more than human assemblage, which allow to go beyond our human vision or the limits, the organic limits of our life and human vision. Then, for example, we can see different historical computer art projects that can see that the possibility of stopping human movement that makes Muybridge with photography in 1878, then will inspire Rebecca Allen to produce the first synthetic image of a moving human being in a realistic way. We have also microscopy images are quite old, but thanks to computer technologies and the reduction of the reality to information, will allow Christa Sommer and Laura Mignot to produce a microscope, from where the audience can merge different organic creatures. Also, the vision of the blue marble from the mission Apollo 17 in 1972 will inspire Myron Kruger, that is the creator of one of the first visual interactive interfaces the video plays, to invite his audience to fly over the globe, the planetary globe. We also have the perceptron, that was one of the first or an early pattern recognition system and algorithm, that something like the beginning of machine learning, will, after the same mechanism will be used by Simon Penny in his project Traces, which a set of infrared cameras are recording the movements and learning from the movements of the audiences to reproduce inside an immersive environment, a cave, a pluri-composite creator that interacts with the spectator, with the dancing. Also, we have computer tomography and the possibility to look inside the body, and how Jill Scott produces this game in their skin, in which we can navigate inside our body and see it in a completely different way. Coming back to the beginning of this talk, I will say that another quotation that, okay, climate change nowadays is a radical alteration of knowledge. Claire Colebrook said that one can only open up the post-Anthropocene point of view if we extend the view of this world beyond the bounds of climate, and see climate as one expression among many of a broader time and a broader human life. Lynn Margulis at Symbiotic Planet also says Gaia, in all her symbiogenic glory, is inherently expansive, subtle, aesthetic, ancient, and exquisitely resilient. And we people are just like our planet mates and cannot put an end to nature. We can only pose a threat to ourselves. Then we have the terms that we usually deploy to refer to Anthropocene issues, as there are, for example, self-maintenance, risk assessment, management, resilience, adaptation, mitigation, sustainability. All them denotate extensive multiplicities, or what is the same, already know and equivalent quantities. When we are using these terms, we can only envision a change of degree. What is to say, we assume that our life will continue being the same and change with only small changes in degree, for example, with less carbon emissions. This also reinforces the cybernetic image of our world as an enclosed globe composite of different systems that we can control to ensure our self-maintenance. However, as Isabel Stenger's noticed, in catastrophic times, when different stakeholders are pretending to control our environment, they are only controlling our perception of the same. These authors are calling for a radical change in our way of living, and the substitution of these terms, or the terms we usually use to talk about climate change, by others as care, respect, and concern. According to Deleuze, art, when it's assembling different materials, produce affects. Affects are not just affective or pathological reactions of our body, but they are also events of disruption, able to go beyond of what is lived, what is to say, or actual perceived world, already conceptualized and subordinated to intentionality and human interest. Art could assemble new forces and disparate materials and make us experience what is not yet existent or usually not perceived, what is not actual, opening to other possible futures, or what is the same, maintaining the existence of the possible, which now looks as exhausted. Then we have that different, today artistic projects combine different resources, as for example, data visualization, immersive environments, also machine learning, to produce to transport us to environments where we can perceive things that usually we cannot we cannot perceive, and to to connect us with realities that we usually are not connected. And for example, we have this dialogue with the Nobotic South by Nobotic Research that make possible to us using different data, open source data from internet, and to experience the evolution of icebergs in Antarctica. We also know the project by Rasa and Ritis, atmospheric forest, that make us feel and perceive how a forest is living and breathing. And we have other projects, for example, Machine of Worries by Alexandra Dice-Ginsberg. This work is not showing us how machine learning is able to learn and reproduce some birds, but he's transporting us to a possible future where birds are not existent anymore. It's something like with the reproduction, the artificial presence of these birds, the project is just make us feel an absence. We have also this other project of simulation where the artist is applying complex simulation algorithms to imagine how the life can emerge on Mars completely indifferent of the humans. Not Mars is terraformed to say in some way, not to harbor human life, but to produce completely different forms of life. That reinforces what Lynn Margulis says, that that Gaia or planet is indifferent to life. And we continuing with simulation, we have this project Asunder by Julian Oliver, Tegan Bryan, and Ben Scholle, that taking data continuously from internet and with complex climate models is just making suggestions of what we have to do to have a resilient world or environment. And some of these suggestions are so surprising, as for example, erase a complete city. It shows what can be the consequences of leave just computers to decide for us, to say for some way. Okay, I think I have exhausted my time. And then if there is any question or...
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you. Okay, so one or two questions from the audience.
Okay, there's questions.
Okay, so I just yeah, thank you for giving such a rich overview also about this aesthetics of perception. I would so also introducing, showing so many artworks dealing with various, like, I don't know, senses, remote and close. But my question would be, yeah, so also from what we discussed earlier and from Douglas Kahn's lecture and all these senses, so what do you think about these relations between like senses and perception, or sensory perception, and how much this comes at the moment into the like a contemporary digital art also as a really an issue, so that we would like, or does it say something new when we start using, or also like you show, so even this image, about all this remote sensing, all satellite imagery and different other technologies. So yeah, basically the same question as Douglas. So what do you think? So how many,
Yes.
which medias or which technologies are important in arts today?
Yes, no, technologies are really important. And what I see that is well, the importance of technologies is, as Stigler says, human beings transindividuate in the milieu and the mediums of its epoch. Then technologies has changed our perception. The vision we have of our world is completely different than the vision and that is showing, for example, we see our world using all this process of inscription, technological process of inscription. And the problem is that our technologies used to obfuscate themselves, and sometimes we are not aware of how they are changing our perception. And they are really complex and difficult to grasp. But they have also this amazing potentiality that Deleuze is explaining. Not he attributes this to art, not especially to technology, of make a pair that is not actual, that we usually cannot perceive. Bergson also talks about that, to say, okay, usually we perceive our life divided in a quantified manner, that this responds to our necessity to survive. And when we are perceiving our reality in this way, we are not aware of what is in the middle of what is duration, of what is below this quantified reality, that or practical interest or organical needs. And this technological art, when is hybridized with natural systems, and we have seen a lot of examples here when they are working with nature, with the sound of nature, with the energy of water, with different the evolution of different bacteria, is connecting us to this reality that is not actual, or that is not only guided by your interests and immediate needs. And we can start perceiving nature as another that is not us. And we can start having this respect and this care for the natural systems, to say in some way.
Thank you. Really great. I think it's a perfect how you put it now. And I think, yeah, there's this we could, so there is also some more. Thanks, exactly. Yeah, I agree with Oksana. Thank you, Sandra, for your broad perception discourse presentation. Yes. So, okay, so thank you very much. And then we again